Thank you. I'm John, and I'm an alcoholic. And it's good to be here. And I, too, like to thank the committee. I usually forget that. My wife, when I left, she said to me, "Don't forget to thank the committee." So I want to thank the committee for this weekend, and boy, that was a great talk, huh? Can you imagine a person can talk like that without not having too much education? I was scared to death to speak in AA. I was sober 5 years. I arrived in Marlborough, Mass. about 27 years ago. On 1:30 in the morning, I was hitchhiking. I was broke. I didn't know where I was. In the main street, there is a flop house called Hotel. And I went in there and I slept in the men's room. And the next night I went to a meeting, Saturday night meeting, and I met a fella by the name of Paul who says to me, "John," he says, "there is a new group starting in Worcester Monday night. Would you like to go?" I said, "Sure." I walked into my first step meeting, where I got sober in Syracuse, New York. They had no step meetings, but every meeting, like I noticed you have done here, was to read the 5th chapter of Alcoholics Anonymous, and 5th chapter talks about the program of recovery. I didn't know what it was because I couldn't read and write, so that was a joke I was making. And I walked in, and what they did there, and still doing it, because I still go there twice a week, was to read the first few pages of the step. And after that, they would get together about 12 people in each table, and they would start to express their ideas, their insights, their beliefs as to what this particular step means to them. And there, at the age of 33, so over 5 years, I have heard for the first time about a program of recovery. But it didn't make sense to me. I heard things that I knew nothing about, I did not understand. So I had made no plans of going back. And now and then, Paul would say to me, "Would you like to go to Worcester?" I would say yes. But what happened was that I met Father Fred. Father Fred was new, and he was very active in institutions. He says to me, "John, I am looking for someone to travel with me. Would you like to come?" I said, "Sure," but I said, "Don't ask me to speak, because I talk very poor English, and I don't have an education." Well, he said, "Don't worry about it," and I thought that meant no. So we traveled many institutions. One of them was a Walpole prison, a maximum prison. We go there at Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, and Father Fred would stand up, and he would talk to these people. One day, he stood up, and he says to these people, "I brought a speaker with me." Well, I knew there was nobody else there. But I looked around anyway. Now, what do you say to the killers? I mean, I'm just a Skid Row bum. I drink Muscadoodle. I have never had a hate in my life. I had a terrible time trying to get enough booze. And I have never done a lot of things that people do. I got mixed up with cops quite often, and I have not disliked the cops. I have one ambition. I always want to put one of them down, and I never was successful because they always sent 2 or 3 of them. But one night I was in a place called Smitty's in Syracuse, New York. Normally, I don't go to Smitty's because that's where all the New York Indians drink. I am a Micmac Indian. I don't drink in Smitty's because Micmacs and New York Indians don't communicate too well. But every once in a while, when I drank, I'll get this urge that I could lick anyone. So I would go to Smitty's. And I would stand there drinking, and I would look around until I find someone who looks like I don't like. Then I would stare at him until he got the message, and if he didn't like it, I would go over there and I would tap on his shoulders, and I would say to him, "You know, you look like somebody I don't like." And I would hit him. And then they would call the cops, and I would wait. And one day they sent this big cop, all by himself. But he was a big fat cop. So I figured I could take care of him. So we were wrestling, and finally I got a good hold on his pants, and I pulled. But he was so fat that his pants came first. And next morning in the courtroom, he brought his pants with him. And he's holding them up like this to Judge Dorsey. Judge said, "John," he calls me John because I've been there before. And what's the problem? I said, "Nothing. I just tried to put him down, but he's so fat." So when I said that, Judge Dorsey started to laugh. I didn't know he was an alkie until much later in my sobriety. So other people in the courtroom started to laugh too. So I laughed too. Until I get 3 months, they were all still laughing when I left. But you don't stand up in Walpole prison and tell these killers that how you tear a cop's pants. Because these people kill people, and they have pride. So I said to Father Fred later, "You wasn't supposed to ask me to speak." He says, "I tell lies." And I couldn't help but sitting there listening to this lady. Boy, she got a language. And I was saying to myself, boy, sure, we have changed. Sometimes we don't see it, but sometimes somebody reminds us we have changed. And I was sitting there not only enjoying and believing what she was saying, but I also knew that I was going to speak too. And I don't have an education, and I really don't talk good English. But I am very grateful that I could share the same stage with this young lady and feel comfortable. It has been a long way from Walpole prison talking to While maybe it is true I have not improved my language, but there is something inside has allowed me to feel good about myself. I am not from an alcoholic home, I don't believe. My father drank. I have a sister who lives in a reservation in Canada, and she would come to visit me every summer. And last summer she was telling me how well off we were, and that was news to me because I don't remember. But my sister said that my father made moccasins for the company, for the lumber company, and he made by the dozens, and he would make axe handles and snowshoes, and he would bring them to a company store, and he would trade everything for food. And my sister said that when my father arrived, we had one room full with food. And my sister's idea of wealth is to have one room full with food. And thank God she still believes that today. But my father also sang in this small church in reservation. And Sunday morning he would stand there and he would hold the railing in one hand because he needed to. And he had a book on another hand. And he would close his eyes and he would sing and sweat. And I used to sit there hoping he never let the railing go. That's how I remember about my father. I am not from a dysfunctional home, but I am from a troubled home. Because when my father died, and then my family took sick. We lost 7 members in my family. In 5 years, they died with TB. I had twin brothers who died in the same year. And when I was 13, my mother was dying with TB. And I started to have fears then. I have fears all my life. And I still do. But my fears in those days was that I felt that I was looked upon as if I was next. And it was very real to me, and I want you to know that years later, in my recovery, I have come to see that it was my mind, it was telling me that I was being rejected, and never was. My people tried to reject me. It is one of those recoveries that came to me as I was coming to the step meetings. When my mother died, I did not look for a home. I lived in this old house with a dog for about almost a year. My people worked in lumber camps in Maine, so I have decided that I should go to a lumber camp. I left home when I was 14. I arrived in Patton, Maine a couple of days later, asked if I could get a job in lumber camp, but the fellow in the office said that I was too young. The war has taken most of the younger people, and he said they need a dishwasher, and if you wish to walk 24 miles in the woods, it's up to you. And I did. And I met a man by the name of Bill Langster, who was in charge, who was very glad to see me because he was washing dishes. And I was with him for 4 years. And now and then, Bill would bring me to his home. He had 2 beautiful daughters, so I've always liked to go home with him because I used to wish a lot in those days. You know, when he doesn't drink, he wishes a lot. But it was his family who suggested it when I was 18 that I should join the younger people, that I had been in woods too long. And I decided that I wanted to go back to my reservation only to show my people now that I have grown. But I thought it would be nice to go back as a soldier. So with that in mind, I traveled to Quebec City because I thought that if I could join the Canadian Army, I would be able to go home when I get a pass. I didn't join because I'm a patriotic type of person. Sick as I was then, I knew that this country was ours before it was yours. I was hoping maybe I can win a medal without getting hurt. because I'm a very sensitive person and I get hurt easily and I don't suffer well. What I didn't know was that if you don't have an education in Canadian Army, they don't allow you to go on training. So I wound up washing dishes. And that's when I started to have trouble. See, I didn't know that although I washed dishes for 4 years and I really didn't mind it, Canadian Army gave me a different feeling, like if I wasn't as good as the next person. And for years I never knew how to handle that. I tell lies about it. I think that I was intelligent enough to know that lie dishonors a man. Your words, you tell lie, people don't trust you. And you certainly don't trust yourself. I think that I did it because that's the only way I knew how to fit in. I didn't want anyone to know that I was washing dishes. I did not go home. It was just one of the obsessions. I chum around. I met a fella from Ontario, and I don't know whether he's in AA today, but he should be. And at the time when I met him, he didn't drink. He didn't smoke. I didn't drink, and I didn't smoke, and we chum around together for a couple of years. But we talk about doing great things one day. One day, somebody told us that in St. Lawrence Street in Montreal, if you have money, you can go over there and pick the girls right in the street. I mean, you don't have to worry about rejection. They don't even have to like you. I mean, it was good news to me. We talked about that for about 6 months. One day we do that. And one day we went down there with a lot of money, and we found the girls in St. Lawrence Street. And we stood there. And we stood there. And we stood there longer than most girls did. I didn't know I needed a drink. What people would say if I do such a thing. No spiritual experience that night. But we got our discharge together, and he says to me, what do you say that we each buy a suit, and we'll go to a nightclub, we'll have a few drinks, and we'll meet some nice girls. So I went out and I bought a suit, and he did. And we got all dressed up, and we went to a Blue Cafe in Montreal. And in third floor, as you walk in, there is a 4-piece orchestra playing, and in front there is a girl singing practically with no clothes on. And that's where I get my first spiritual awakening. And then I took a drink. I have been listening to people like you and me for 32 years now. And I identified the first time I've heard the speaker in AA, and I still do, because you know what happened to me when I drank? It happened, I guess, to all of us. And I don't know whether I am an alcoholic because I felt uncomfortable of being an Indian, or because I felt ashamed that I couldn't read and write, or that I didn't talk with English. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that we're alcoholics because we have problems. Because, you know, I've been sober 32 years, and I have met a lot of people who are crazy. And some of them poor bastards don't even know enough to drink. spelled the bastard wrong. There seems to be, there's some kind of a tremendous need of an alcoholic. And I suppose in many ways it's a spiritual need, but what I loved about drinking was that I felt free about who I am. I never knew how wonderful it felt to be able to grab somebody's hand and not being sensitive or being uneasy or being ashamed. It was like something that was overwhelming for me. On the other hand, I think that I am also a type of person that when I'm sober, I cannot just let loose. Like some people, they can go crazy without a drink. I get so intelligent, it's sickening. You know. I mean, I like the idea of falling in love about twice a month. You know, looking at a girl about 11 o'clock at night because you no longer, you know, you're looking at her with one eye because you can't see her with two eyes and telling her how beautiful she is. I love that. I wish if I could do that sober. And she really, you think she's beautiful because alcohol affects your vision, and you don't know it until the next morning you look at her and they say, "Holy Christ." I can't wait to get drunk again so far. I like the idea of fighting with New York Indians. You know, it's amazing. Last week I was in Syracuse area and I met some of my friends that I lived in Skids, and we spent hours talking about it. It was really nice. But I guess if there is such thing that you're born an alcoholic, I guess perhaps I am. I arrived in Skid Row on my first drink, and I didn't leave until I arrived in AA 7 years later. Now, I love to drink. I enjoy drinking. I enjoy being with drunks, and I like the fun with drinking. I love music. I really enjoy drinking until about 5 years after I started drinking. Then I think became a very sick person, and alcohol didn't help me anymore. And in my days, I think it was mentioned today, there were no treatment centers in those days. Every once in a while, a bum would say to me, "John, you look sick. Why don't you take a pledge?" And you know, when a bum tells you you look sick, you're sick. You know? And I would see a priest, and he would want me to go to confession. Now, I don't know too much about Catholic religion. My father sang in the church, but there were no priests. We just sat there and he sang. But I have tried to go to church a few times, but it confused me. Because they get up, they sit down, and then kneel down. They can't make up their mind what the hell. You know? But I would go to confession, and the message was, of course, it's try to live a decent life. I knew what to do if I wanted to live a decent life. The problem was that nothing changed. That when I am sober, I am loaded with fear, and fear cripples my life. It really does. I am a very lonely person when I'm sober, and I felt that the reason I was lonely and the reason I was different, it was because I was an Indian. I felt that if I had an education, maybe if I had a nice girl, someone that you really love, and maybe a home and money, like other people I watch sometimes in St. Slina Street when they arrive 8 o'clock at night and walked into this beautiful restaurant, and they would eat and they would dance, and I was standing outside with a pass in my pocket telling me that I could go back to Salvation Army at 11 o'clock. But if I was like that people, you see, I wouldn't feel the way I do. And the message, the first time I've heard Harry J. Harry was a secretary in Central Group in Syracuse, New York. He would bring me home now and then on Sundays for dinner, and he would bring me back to mission. Well, Harry spoke one night, and Harry talked about things that I understood, like fear. See, but I didn't know. See, I didn't know how other people felt the way I did. I lived with bums for 7 years, and I have never heard a bum says to me, "John, today I'm afraid." Nobody talks about how you feel. It's like if it was a sin or something bad, but I felt the same way too. Harry talked about being lonely and, not fit in, and I think if there was an awakening in my early days, was that I thought only an Indian who sleeps on the floor in a mission would have fears. And what's wrong with a man who has a wife and 2 daughters? He's an officer in a bank. He's got a nice home. He's got a couple of cars. And he's telling me that he feels the same way as I do. And I'm sleeping in a mission. And he's not even an Indian. And while the message was not clear, it gave me what I needed, not only to identify, because I believe the first step of recovery was when you start seeing yourself with others, but it also gives you strength, which is, I think, very human, the strength that you never had before, telling you that you're no longer alone, that there are other people who suffer the way you do, and they talk about it. You see, that was the first time I've heard someone talking about himself. I didn't, but that was AA. But before that, I would take a place, or our Tom, who ran the mission, he was a nice man, and he believed his God. And if you attended one of his religious services, you could always sleep on the floor. So I have attended many of Tom's religious services. Once he told me there was a fellow by the name of Billy Graham coming to the War Memorial in Syracuse, that I should go and listen to him because he would help me. I went to listen to Billy Graham for 2 weeks, and I got sober, but he left. And I got drunk, and Judge Dorsey didn't change his mind. I was in a mission one night when a bum get up, and he said that for many years he was a bum just like us, and he said, right in this mission one night, I have accepted Christ as my personal Savior, and since then I have stopped drinking. I got married, I work nights, I own a home, and I have just bought a brand new station wagon. And then he says, any of you bums can do the same thing. All you have to do is move forward. Now, I knew nothing about this Christ. The only thing I know is that for 4 years I listened to lumberjacks talking about him. And by the time they finished with him, you wouldn't want to believe him either. But I moved forward. I've always wanted a station wagon, and this guy kneeled next to me, and he said that I was safe until the next morning. I'm facing a judge. A judge said that the Fayette Park in the city, it's for the decent people to go there on Sundays. And I wasn't drunk. I was sober, trying to sleep in the park. And I got arrested. And so I tried, the only way I knew how, But what happened was, one night I was in a mission. And another bum who got sober in Salvation Army found out that I was in a mission. He came walking in to mission one night and he says to me, "I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous." I said, "Good for you." I have never met one before. I asked you, he says, to come to a meeting with me. I said, "No, I've already had a bed. And the only time I go to a meeting is when I wanted a bed." He said, "At this meeting, they have coffee and donuts, and they're free." Well, I said, "Why didn't you say so?" I walked into my first meeting not dressing too well. I needed a haircut. I've always suffered from wine sores, and I needed to be sober over a month so my face would clear up. But I walked into the Central Group, where I will be, where I was a couple of weeks ago. And the man who stood at the door was a lawyer that I find out later, sober 13 years, and his job was to shake hands. The people who were coming to that meeting. And when he seen me, he grabbed my hand. He said that he was glad to see me. And I wasn't glad to see him at all. You know, I sat down, and my first speaker in AA was a lady judge. And she wanted me to identify. And I said to myself, as soon as I get my donuts. Here I am. I'm 28 years old. I've been in skits for 7 years. I couldn't read and write. I don't dress well. I've never been married. Never owned a car. I'm living in a mission. I'm supposed to pay 35 cents a night, and I'm behind 3 weeks' rent. You know, I have financial problems. And she talks about her father being a judge, and her husband is a doctor and a director to General Hospital. I said to myself, as soon as I get my donuts. But we talk about people in AA who understand other people. And this lawyer, I suppose he knew that I could not identify with the lady judge. He knew I was sick. He knew I needed help because he put his arms around me. He says to me that before you leave, I want you to meet some of my friends. And I met people in AA, and I suppose they say we have to be ready to receive the grace of God, or you have to surrender in order for God to come in. And I guess that's what happened to me. I met people in AA, and I knew they really wanted to help me. I knew they cared. It really touched me. And I came back, and this is, of course, where I have been fortunate. I needed to come back. I needed to learn about alcoholism, about sickness, which I knew nothing of. And I came back, and on my second meeting, I met my sponsor, Pat. Now, I knew Pat. I never liked Pat. I met Pat in Skid Row, and the only reason I didn't like him, he had a degree. And I used to say, there is nothing worse than a bum with a degree. Because he knew everything, drunk or sober. He walks in and he says to me, "I'm your sponsor. I have a car outside," he said, "and I will bring you home." And he would pick me up in a mission every night. And the only problem Pat has is that he's always late. And I couldn't figure out anyone who says, "I'll be there at 8 o'clock, and then never comes till 8:15. I used to get so... See, I didn't know I was perfectionist. I mean, if you see me laying in the sidewalk with long hair, wine sores and dirty, you wouldn't stop and say, "This man, he's a perfectionist." Pat would bring me a sandwich now and then. It meant absolutely nothing to me. Strange, and yet it is not. It was years later when someone said, you know, Pat never eats sandwiches. I used to think that you couldn't eat it. But it was years later when I started to understand about what giving was all about, when I started to appreciate it. Pat used to say to me, you can't live in this mission and stay sober, but I haven't had my own place, and I was comfortable in the mission. But I think God must have been on his side, because one night mission burned down. and Pat said that was the grace of God, and next day he brought me to the 12-step house in Syracuse. They called an open house. And I got a job there working $7.50 a week, and I slept there. And my job was to answer the telephone, to make coffee, wash floors, and wax floors, and wash dishes. But I get thrown out. In those days, those of you who have been sober 32 years ago, was that when someone calls for help, you go and find them and bring them home. People used to do that. That was the way AA was. That's where I learned. One night, the lady called, and these people are playing cards all night. She wanted help, and when they find out who she was, they told me she's been around for years, and that's all she does. It's use people in AA. Now, I knew it was wrong. I knew I was right, but what to do? Well, I did what I've always did when I was right. I upset the table while they're playing cards, and I punched one of them right in his mouth. He had a big mouth anyway, and I never liked the bastard. So they throw me out. 2:30 in the morning. My sponsor picked me up in Fayette Street, and next morning he brought me to Salvation Army with Major Harvey. And I was there for better than 3 years, and I left there at the age of 33. One day broke, and I arrived in Marlborough, Mass. at 1:30 in the morning, and I slept in a men's room, and then I met Father Fred. And Father Fred, who is now 80 years old, sober 29 years, we used to sit in the park, sometimes 2 hours. You see, one thing I have never known was that I didn't know how to live. It took me a long time to be able to say, John, you're 33 years old and you're sleeping on a men's room, not because you're an Indian or because you cannot read and write or because where you were brought up, but because you don't know how to live. And that you have to learn. I remember Father Fred telling me one night, because I go to these step meetings, and if you go to step meetings, there are certain things that book talks about, I don't believe it's easy to accept. Especially if you, like me. For instance, a book talks about alcoholics. It talks about all alcoholics. It's a terrible thing to say. Bill Wilson said, all alcoholics are self-centered in extreme. Now, you're sitting there, you haven't got a home, you don't have an education, you don't have a job, you don't have money, you're lonely, and someone said, you know what your problem is? You're self-centered in extreme. Well, I don't go back to that meeting at all. I go to open meeting where nobody says anything like that. I like to be with people when I said, I don't have a job. Don't worry about it. Just go to meetings and don't drink. I don't have any money. Don't worry about it. Just go to meetings and don't drink. I don't have a car. Don't worry about it. Just go to meetings. I don't have a girl and I'm horny. Don't worry about it. Just go to meetings and don't drink. Now, someone said, I'm self-centered in extreme. Well, I don't go back to that meeting. I don't like people call me names. You go back next week and they want to restore you to sanity. So I said to Father Fred one night, what do you think about this business of being restored? Well, he said, you don't understand what the step's saying. The step says, you come to believe? I said, I did that and don't work for me. He said, you did what? I said, I went to confession one time. I listened to Billy Graham for 2 weeks. I even accepted Christ as my personal Savior, and every damn time I did, judge gave me 3 months. Now, you know, I'm sick, not stupid. Yeah. Well, you said, that's not what stepped me. I was 33 years old, and I asked another man, how do you believe? The key that opens the door to recovery. How do you fit it in? How do you fit it in? You would think that going to meetings 5 years, listening to people, that I would know what to do. No, I didn't. Father Fred says. The book says, all you need is an open mind. That's what the book says. How do you have an open mind? I never had an open mind. I mean, Father Fred said, if you're self-centered and extreme, you are not teachable. Your mind is not open to receive anything. And then he says to me, that changed my life really, because I believed it, because I wanted to. He says, John, it doesn't matter who you are. We all go from where we are with what we have each day. That's just the way it is. And I'm on my way home from Worcester to Marlborough, 16 miles. I'm on a bus. I said to myself, John, you're 33 years old. You haven't got a home to go to. You cannot read and write. You don't have a job. You don't have money. You don't have anything. And Father Fred said, you need to start here. And you know what I said? I think I will. And you want to know something? That yesterday morning when I left home, I left a 14-room house. Outside, there's a car parked that I just paid $23,000. You know, I live like a white man, dollar down. Next morning, I go to a restaurant like I always did, to Paul. Paul says to me, Rita, who was the waitress, know if you could paint her house. She wants an estimate. Why don't you go over and see her? I went to see Rita. I walked around 3 times in her house, and I walked in there, and I said to her, it will cost you $350. She said, you got the job. And I find out later, other contractors wanted $1,200 to $1,400. But because you're trying, it doesn't mean you make sense. I got a job, but I don't have any money. Paul says, go back and ask Rita. She gave me $100. And I went and I got me a room for $7 a week, a little kitchenette. Then I went out and I buy me a white coveralls. I figured if I'm going to be a president in my own company, I should buy me a white coveralls. I went to a meeting that night and I met this man. He says to me, John, I'm told you're looking for a ladder. I said, I am. He says, I work for a telephone company. Monday morning I will deliver you a ladder. But don't tell anyone, it's against the rules. The damn thing is yellow. You can see it miles away, you know. Thank God he was sick. But I finished the house, and I owed Paul $65 worth of groceries. Then I met a plumber in AA. He says to me, John, I'm told you're painting houses. I said, I do. He said, I have a ranch house, a small ranch house about 7 miles from here. All you need is a step ladder. So I borrowed a step ladder, and I got all my drop cloths together. I stood in the corner, and I stopped the bus. This guy, he stops, and he looks at my ladder. And he looks at me, and he says, you can't be serious. I said, I am. I'm self-employed. He says to me, if I give you a ride, would you promise you'll never do it again? My next house was a school teacher.
She taught school for 40 years, told me many times. Paul says to me, John, there's 69 questions. Why don't you ask her? And one day I said to her, you know, I need to get my driving license, but I cannot read and write, and I am wondering if you could help me. Well, she said, I've taught thousands of people. And no time at all, I knew the questions inside out. Even I knew I was going to pass. So I went into Marlborough Police Station where I took my test. This guy brought me to a room, and he only asked me a couple of questions. I mean, I was depressed. I said, what the hell's used to have an education when nobody gives a damn? You know? But Paul came to see me with this black station wagon. I used to call it 11 passengers because I used to bring 11 people to a meeting. John, he said, for $750, it's yours. But I had no money. The lady I met at the Saturday night group where I belong to, she says to me, John, if you can get $250, I will co-sign for you. So I borrowed $250, and here I was in my 5th year sobriety. I was a president in my own company. I had a driving license and 11 passenger station wagon. I decided maybe I should find me a girlfriend. But I had these 4 teeth missing. I've lost that while I was communicating with those New York Indians. And, I figured you couldn't find a type of a girl that I wanted with 4 teeth missing. Someone said that there was a new dentist in AA. And I've learned by this time that new people are very anxious to help you. So I went over to see him. I said to him, I'm having a problem. What's the problem? He says. I said, I'm looking for a girlfriend, but I have these 4 teeth missing. He gave me a card, and a couple of months later, he gave me a new set of teeth. And then I met another lady in AA. She says to me, John, I'm told you have a car. I said, 11 passengers. She said, I run a home of alcoholic women. I have 9 girls, and I'm looking for someone to bring these girls to a meeting on Thursday night. Would you like the job? I said, I'll be very happy to. And that's where I met Kathy. On our way back from the meeting, I said to her, would you like to go out on a date? And she said, no. I mean, she didn't even think. And I'm a very sensitive person, and I get hurt easily, and I don't suffer well. On my way home, I said to myself, who in the hell she thinks she is? Here she is living with all those women, none of them have anything. And here I am, I'm president in my own company. I drive 11 passenger station wagon, and I got a new set of teeth. Who the hell wants her anyway? So next Thursday, picked the girls again, and on our way back, I said to her, would you like to go to a show in Boston Sunday? And she said, yes. And on our way back from the show, I asked her to marry me. She said, I don't even know you. Well, I said, we still have a few miles to go. We'll get it done. And 3 months later, we were married. We only had $85. Nobody was at the wedding. We rent a 3-room apartment that was empty. And Kathy and I walked in there with the coffee table that the man who run the Fate House once made of furniture, so he made us a coffee table. But Kathy and I didn't have any clothes. We had no television, we had no radio, and we had no beds. We had 3 rooms were empty. And my wife says to me, where are we going to sleep? I said, we'll sleep on the floor. I've been around long enough to know you can have fun on the floor. You know, I'm sick, not stupid. And while we were laying on the floor, I said to my wife, Kathy, you know, I would love to have a boy because I'm alone and I'm the only one could keep this name going. And if you give me a boy, I'll buy you a diamond. You have to be a little sick. You're laying on the floor. But the beautiful thing was that Kathy was sick enough so she believed me. I walked into a bank. I wanted $200. The fella wanted to know if I had a collateral. I didn't know what in the hell it was. Nobody in AA talks about collateral. I went 3 banks and that's what they wanted. So I went to see Paul. I said to myself, Paul has a degree. He'll know something about collateral. I walked into a restaurant and I said to Paul, what's collateral? Oh, he says, you got nothing to worry about. I said, why? He says, you don't have any. So I said, what can I do? He says, you can pray. I said, Christ, Paul, they don't need God, they need collateral. I got that message. I went to Hudson, which is 7 miles from Marlborough, and I walked into a bank, and this gentleman was about ready to retire that year, he told me. And I told him the story about Kathy and I, that I promised her a diamond. And well, he says to me, we don't usually lend money with sad stories. But then he says, how much do you want it anyway? And I said, $400. But it sounded so good. And I walked into Allen Jewelry store with $400 in my pocket. And I said to him, show me the best diamond that you have. He did. I said, show me the cheapest one. Show me one for $150. I said, I'll take it. He says, you want to charge it, of course? I said, of course. And I brought it to my wife, Kathy. And a couple of days later, early one morning, she calls me up. She says, honey, it's a girl. I says, you got to be kidding. She said, no. And it was a girl. Next Christmas, she was in hospital again. She calls me up and she said, honey, it's a girl. I said, don't worry about it. Just have an open mind. And she did. Next Christmas came and she was in hospital again. She calls me up and she said, honey, it's twin boys. So you know what I say. God will give you what you want if you're willing to work hard for it. So I said to Kathy, what you said that next Christmas we hang our stockings. And 2 years later, a girl came along, and 2 years later, a boy came along, and this is my story. But it is an AA story. It is not a story where some Indian walked in one night with a lot of brains. So if someone, particularly if someone who is new, or someone who is over 5 years and you're going through a lot of things that I went through, maybe you think now that you'll never make it, you'll never get out of bills. You cannot make enough money. You're telling lies to yourself, of course. Maybe you blame the fact that you cannot read and write, or because you think you're an Indian. Or maybe you're having a lot of problem with relationships. Because if you're like me, if you are self-centered and extreme, you got a lot of problems with relationships. And if you don't come to believe, then you don't have an honesty to point a finger where you must. Because it is by believing that we look upon to other steps where we start taking our own inventory. And then another I was over at the Fifth Step meeting the other night, and Bill Wilson said on the Fifth Step, if you have not taken this fourth and fifth step, that faith without works is still not reached. You have not reached that faith without works. There are people who will tell you that I only take first 3 steps. But if you go to step meetings and understand what the 3 steps mean, the third step says you just open the door to recovery. You have not as yet walked in. And if you're sitting there having a lot of problems like I did, there is a good chance that you are not teachable. You are not teachable. One needs to become teachable. So in closing, first of all, I'm grateful for AA. I have 6 children. They're all now grown. And my oldest daughter, she's the only one in the program. She had trouble with alcohol. Other kids do not have problems. And they have problems, but they're not on drugs or alcohol. They're crazier than hell. About 10, 12 years later, I went back to this lady. She taught me how to read and write. I learned how to be a carpenter. She taught me things about building codes. I took a test one day in the state of Massachusetts, and I got the license as a contractor with no restrictions. Proud of that. And so I have other people carrying the ladders for me now. But for me, probably the greatest gift, believe it or not, I know enough about me that I realize that some things about me I will bring to grave. I believe that I was born and I'm going to die an imperfect person. But I've learned something too. I've learned that I don't have to be perfect in order to be effective. I don't have to be perfect in order to love another person or to sit down and to listen to another person. Those things I choose in life, the gift that God gave me. I can choose. And anytime I want to choose, I can choose these things, and I don't always choose. The other thing, I guess, to sit here tonight when I'm listening to this Al-Anon lady, I think any normal person would be scared to death to speak after her. I'm not normal. But I think to be able to sit there to understanding and allow years of experience to come to surface in your mind, to be able to say, John, you're a lucky person. And you sure have a lot to be grateful for. And it's good to be here. Thank you very much.